Welcome to the Access Sport podcast, your best chance to learn more about our students, our teams and our programmes.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Access Sport podcast, joined as usual by Jordan, our careers lead at Access Sport, and myself, director of Access Sport. And we're very lucky this afternoon, as we record anyway, to be joined by Claudine Brown, head of English and Maths. Now, we said off air, it's Claude. We are going to call you Claude. So for anyone who's confused, saying why have we shown that she's known as Claude and she goes by the name of Claude on a regular basis. But for any of the staff, because this is part of the reason of recording, any of the staff who are trying to find her, you might find her as Claudine on the emails. But Claude, thank you for joining us.
No problem. Lovely to be here.
Brilliant. And we'll be following our usual script, so to speak, where we'll be taking a journey through your career, which has been an interesting one, as always, with our guests. And we'll be picking out some of the bits that we would like to discuss in more detail. But as I briefly mentioned then, it's great to get the staff on from across the group and learn a little bit more about your role and your contribution to Access Sport and what you're hoping to achieve on the sports side. And again, just dig into how you've got to where you are now. So on that note, you can go back, as I said before, Claude, you can go back as far as you want, but talk us through your journey, your career from the start.
How long you got? Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief. First of all, it's great to be here. I've been following the podcast and it's excellent, guys, so keep up the great work. I didn't start off heading into teaching. I ended up here, but this isn't where I began. So in school, I was always minded towards being a lawyer. Legal career was always the way. So from school, everything that I did, all the choices that I made in terms of my options in year 9, my college courses, it was all about becoming a solicitor. So I was very purposeful about that. So straight from school into college, did my A-levels. Whilst there, a really inspirational teacher suggested that I go for Oxford and try and apply to get into Oxford to do law there. To be honest, I was thinking, don't think so. But I did apply. To be honest, I was shortlisted, which blew my mind anyway, because to be shortlisted is pretty huge, and I was quite proud of that. When I got there, I was like surrounded by people who didn't look like me, sound like me. I was well out of my comfort zone, but I was like, I really want to do law. And in actual fact, being around or being out of my comfort zone was actually really motivating. As it stands, didn't get in, but that's fine. I still headed towards university. Did my law degree, and I got a 2-1. I did all right in that, and qualified to be a lawyer. So this was like straight from school, college, uni, no breaks. Wasn't all glamorous on the way. I had a couple of, I worked in a sports shop, so there's that. So I can sell some suits, no problem. I worked with Stay Bright Windows. This isn't a sales pitch, and then I go straight into a sales pitch. What else did I do? Walker's Crisp Factory as well, guys, at nights. So 2 red, 2 green, 2 blue. I did a few jobs. Lots of legal secretary work. Really important when you are career-minded to just get around the people that you want to become one day. So even if you don't get a paid work, even if voluntary, just be in the same vicinity, hear the conversations, hear the vocabulary they use, take it on board, learn it, and use it as if you knew it all along. So I did a lot of that, working in solicitors' firms. Had a few knockbacks where, people look at me, look at my hair, go, you can't have hair like that if you want to be a solicitor, and you can't. I was just like, I want to show the world that I can do it. And straight from university, I went into a firm and I eventually got my training contract, which you have to do for 2 years. And after the 2 years, you qualified. So I became a lawyer, and I was a family lawyer. And my bread and butter was basically representing individuals in contentious cases where parents had split up. So I represented a lot of dads. I don't know if you saw the Fathers for Justice hanging off Spider-Man. You know the one. You've been there, have you? You weren't there. But,
just took me shoes off, actually.
It was before, yeah.
all right, but yeah, I represent loads and loads of dads, but some really successful cases where we were able to ensure that the children got to have a relationship with both parents, represented grandparents. I had a great time, to be honest. It was a really fulfilling job, working in law, being able to work in the courts, High Court in London, rub shoulders with barristers. I did it before judges. So I'm not really put off by speaking to people because I've spoken to people at the highest level. I've spoken to, but one thing I loved about that career is it helps you with language, helps you know how to put it up there when you've got to pull it out of the bag, and also how to break it down for lay people who have no idea what the law's all about. So for me, that was a great foundation anyway for teaching, especially anything to do with English. So carried on as a lawyer for a little while. To be honest, guys, I went into it to try and save the world, really, one family at a time. But I soon found that the legal field can be a bit cutthroat. And every now and then it kind of knocked me off my center, because I was like trying to help people and then, taking their money and taking more of their money and taking more of their money. And it's like, and then having these targets. And at some point I started to think, Claude, is this really what you want to do? I did an evening class to do teacher training, and I was hooked pretty much. So I realized that I was a natural teacher. It was something that I did at church. I taught weekly. Law was something I learned, but teaching was something that I felt that I was, if you see what I mean. And a teacher was what I was innately. So it was almost like, and it's going to sound a little bit spiritual, but almost like a bit of a calling. I was like, there was something about teaching that just resonated with me, and especially in FE, because the idea of giving people a second chance and another bite at the cherry. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go and do my PGCE. So while practicing law, I thought, here we are, I've got to make a decision. And I actually applied for uni the last year, where it was $3,000 a year. I think it's something a bit different now. But the last year of $3,000 a year, I got on, did a PGCE and specialised in literacy. Started teaching, and I literally felt like I was home. I was like, this is exactly where I need to be. So a lot of people ask me, how are you going to go from law into teaching? I was like, well, like this. This is what I do. And being able to just see those light bulb moments in learners' faces when they're like, at school, I didn't get it, but in your classroom, I do. And I'm a creative teacher as well, so I don't like to use the bog standard methods. But anyway, I'm rambling now. But I became a teacher. Ended up at Access, only doing a 6 week. So it was 6 weeks sick leave. So I was covering for someone for 6 weeks. That was in December 2011. It's now December 2000. I just never left, basically.
Long 6 weeks.
Yeah, they just couldn't get with me. So literally I was only meant to be here 6 weeks, and I've stayed here 11 years, and that's because I fully believe in the ethos behind Access. Again, giving kids a second chance, doing a vocational subject that they enjoy, something that makes them tick, but also teaching them a subject that they're gonna need. And letting them know that it doesn't have to be painful, it doesn't have to be punishment. English and maths are foundational, and they're going to empower you to do well beyond college. So I landed in this college, and I've loved it. I've loved every step of it. And now being head of a department where I started. So when I first came, I was teaching English maths, doing a bit of ALS as well. And then eventually I went into different roles, quality teams and here, there a bit. But I've ended up being head of English and maths, which is awesome for me, because I'm finally able to make some decisions in a department that I am very passionate about. So that was a very long explanation of the journey here, but that's my story. So it
was impressive. It was impressive that you got through that in that amount of time. A lot to chew on from our point of view. So I've made some mental notes of the things that I'd like to ask, and then I'll hand over to Jordan. Cool. The first thing that stuck out for me, which I really loved, was what you spoke about in relation to absorbing vocabulary and using it and acting like you know it. I love that. That's something I've always tried to do, certainly from a young age. And I still remember some of those like nuggets that like you go, do you know what? I'll always use that. But words in particular, I think vocabulary is so powerful, and we're going to come back to it later when we talk about English, definitely. But I think being around people who you know you're looking to, or you're aspiring to be, or you're aspiring to be in their position is really important. But really sucking that up and using those words to make people think sometimes that you know a little bit more than you do. But it can be so powerful, you know, vocabulary, can't it, in that way?
It makes all the difference, Gary. It really makes all the difference. I was there like in circles with barristers and I had no clue sometimes what they're talking about. Honestly, I was like, what are they about? And I was not going to ask. So what I'd do is I'd go away, go and find out what it meant, come back and insert that into my speech as though I made the word up myself. And that's how I learn. So you listen. Sometimes you've got to be quiet. You know, just listen, gather up the information, absorb it, learn it, and then use it.
The thing that stood out for me, Claude, sorry, Gary, is the what you said about barriers in terms of, you know, people not looking like you and, you know, sort of sniggering at, you know, whether you could succeed. And I think from a learner's point of view, that can be the same in terms of higher education or jobs. You know, you could go to certain universities and think people aren't from the same area as me, they don't speak like me. How did you deal with breaking those barriers down?
I to be honest, because I grew up with my dad was a copper, so having a dad who was a policeman, being young, and it was like, oh, my dad, the hero, is a policeman. And as I got older, I realised my dad's a policeman. I've seen my dad be how shall I put it, constantly in situations where he was viewed as the outsider. And he relished and he absolutely flourished. And I watched him suffered a lot of racism and actually got it from, you know, other races and his own. But he was an excellent policeman. And I think seeing my dad influenced me largely that, you know, you can be in scenarios that perhaps people treat you as if you're an outsider and that you don't belong. And you can flourish and turn that into your superpower, if you like. So in terms of how I coped with it, I tried my very best to ignore it, because if you're going to try and make me feel like I don't belong, I'm going to show you that I do. I remember just very, very briefly, I was in one firm where we had to look for some files in the basement, and was with top solicitor, learning from her, listening to her kind of thing. And we were in the basement looking for this file, and it was filthy, dusty, really dirty, smelt down there, and her hands got covered in dirt and dust from the files. And you know what she said to me? She lifted up her hand. She goes, "Look, Claude." She said, "Claude, I'm nearly your colour now." And like, so I was like, "That's dirt. That's not my colour." And I had a few scenarios like this where I was constantly reminded that, you know, this is an area that not that many people of colour go into. And I could have easily just thought, you know what, I can't be bothered with this. But thankfully now that's changed loads. And I think that when you do face those barriers, you've got to overcome them for those coming behind you. You absolutely have. I had it from a judge as well. Walked into a hearing once, sat in the solicitor's chair. Me and my client were wearing the same outfit. So I was representing a white lady in a suit. We wore black suits. I sat where the solicitors sit. And when the hearing started, the judge thought that my client was the solicitor and that she was representing me. I was like, well, actually, no, I'm the solicitor and I'm here to represent. So I've faced it at all levels, but I actually love it. I turn it into motivation and use it, basically.
Do you know what? That's similar. It's a similar. I mean, you could listen to that, and this is not a criticism. You could listen to that and almost say, well, maybe that's not the way to deal with it. You should be fighting against it. And you know, you think of that example there and go, and you could have easily turned that into a confrontational situation.
Yeah.
Reported it to HR and all the various things that should happen. Let's be honest, should happen. That's procedure, so to speak. But you've dealt with it in the way that you've used it as a motivation, and you also used a similar point before, or you made a similar point, sorry, where you said, I wouldn't ask questions. I'd not know it, but I wouldn't ask questions. Again, the normal lesson would be, if you're not sure, there's never a silly question. Always ask questions. But that's not the real world, is it?
True.
Do you know what I mean? And I think I think that's and what's good about this podcast is, you know, we can talk openly about it, and everyone's got a different way of approaching things. Everyone's got a different moral compass. And I love that's, you know, that's what's worked for you. And I think that's an important lesson for any young person, is you've got to deal with things in the way that you think is feels right.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, and I totally agree, Gary, that asking questions of the right people, especially your mentors, your teachers, those that are there to support you, they're always going to be ready to answer your questions. And I've had good mentors in the past who have, but when you're in the thick of it and you're with the professionals and it's time to pull it out of the bag, do what you got to do. And that's how it's worked for me. And to be fair, I'm still doing it now, and all my colleagues are going to hear this. But yeah, even now, you know, the amount of acronyms that there are in education is mad. So I'll be there, I'll be like, what's that mean? And like, I ain't asking no one, I'm going to check it out. But yeah, it's good to ask questions, but it's also good to find out as well, and do what you got to do.
Claude, you know where you are now in terms of, you was talking about, you know, heading the department and having sort of like input at that level. Is them certain situations that you sort of went through, do they sort of mold who you are now in terms of how you deal with situations or how you treat people?
Yeah, definitely the second thing you said in terms of how I treat people. I'm very, very conscious of the way that how I lead makes other people feel. And I think that's key again in the workplace, in education. It's really important that when you say something, once it's left your mouth, you can't take that back. And everything we do has a consequence. So what my own situation, and again, seeing my dad has very much molded the way that I treat people. And I often find if you treat people well, it comes back to you in some way, shape or form. So it's definitely affected the way that I lead. And when I manage people, I manage them how I want to be managed myself. And that's key as well. Yeah, I think we need more leaders and less bosses, if you see what I mean.
I think it's a learnable behaviour as well, isn't it? So when you put yourself in like learner's shoes, you can try and sort of preach to them that no matter what you're going through, whether you're a sports student, a creative student, you might be having trouble playing football or having trouble with maths, whatever you're going through, you know, you can sort of develop your personality around, you know, whatever it is, positive or negative.
Absolutely. That's your power. That's your key. Your individuality. Again, it's very, very powerful. You don't need to have be under any pressure to be like anybody else. That's certainly something that I'm aware of. There's no pressure for me to do this like someone else. I've got to do it the way that I feel is right. Get advice, don't get me wrong, get advice and get guidance. But yeah, being an individual is what it's all about. And in fact, I said to the Maths and English team when I started this role, don't expect me to be like the previous lady, because that ain't me. And I also say to the team, if you see me stepping out of line, if something seems off, talk to me. Don't talk about me, talk to me. And that's another thing for our students. You've got to be ready to take criticism when the time comes, and constructive feedback. Don't necessarily be offended at everything. If someone points out, you know what, you could have done that a bit better, take it on the chin and reflect on yourself and go, actually, I could have done, you know, and then go from there.
Yeah, listen,
that's something I struggled with massively, that, you know, when, like, not to make this all about me, but like getting criticism at a younger age, maybe like, you know, 18 to 21, I just couldn't deal with it. Like I would always take it personally, or I would always react emotionally. And I think that's a big lesson to learn, if you want to take anything from somebody who's older than you, is that people aren't always attacking you personally. Sometimes, you know, it's an honest conversation that just needs to be had. But I think as a younger person, it can be difficult not to react emotionally. But I think if you can develop a way where you can, you know, look at things subjectively and be like, okay, they don't hate me, they don't dislike me, they're just saying something that they believe might help me in the future. I think, you know, you've mentioned the word superpower a couple of times, and I think as a young person, having a head on your shoulders like that genuinely is a superpower.
Use it as your fuel. Use it as your fuel. And don't take everything that's said that's seemingly negative. Don't take it as one. Take it as something that's going to build and strengthen and empower you. I mean, this comes into the context of English and maths loads. If we're going to be straightforward, our learners who come to us doing English and maths access sport, they've failed already. There's no point in us being pretty about it. They've unfortunately not been able to pass it as yet. So you're already, when you come to us, they already feel on a bit of a back foot. But when we say to them, look, these are the areas where you're falling, These are the things that you're doing. You've got to be ready to listen and go, actually, yeah, I've been doing that wrong for the last 3 years. I'm willing to listen to you and take this on the chin and do it. And it's part of your learning. It's part of your development. How do you develop if you don't appreciate your weaknesses?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's I mean, we'll get on to a little bit more of your role now, because Jordan created a bit of a segue there. Nice one. We'll try and play devil's advocate a little bit. There'll be learners watching this going, can't stand English and maths. Why do I have to do it?
Yeah.
You know, we can toe the line all day to say you've got to. It is what it is. But you're, from a number of conversations, in fact, daily conversations that I have with you, you strongly believe that it should be a more enjoyable process, that we need to try and make sure that it's contextualized into the industry as much as possible.
Yeah.
Obviously, from your point of view, we've picked up a few examples of how you used English almost seamlessly in your own career, albeit I don't expect you as someone who failed English in school. So that's probably an important point to make. But I think what the challenge you've got, without doubt, and you've just alluded to it then with sports and creative, is they're probably the two industries more than anything else where there's a lot of learners thinking this has got nothing to do with what I'm going to do in the future. Right. What's your answer to that?
Okay, so this is the question on the lips of many of our learners when they come to us, guys. So they'll come and that's one of the first things. Why am I having to do this again? I've come to do a sports course. I've come to do music, media, computers. Why am I doing this? If you're going to go and build a house, you don't start with buying your soft furnishings. You've got to start with the foundations and the breeze blocks. You've got to dig down a bit and start from the bottom. And the thing about it is, those foundations needs to be strong command of English language and numerical skills. Now you can all day, you get learners going, oh, I'm never going to need algebra. And then funnily enough, you go and try and decorate your living room and you've got the wallpaper, you've got the area of the space that you've got to do it in, you've got the cost of how much it is. Real life needs these skills. Jobs need these skills. So what I do is, rather than it being, I think language again is very important. Sometimes even as teachers, we mess up and we're like, yo, you've got to do this because it's a privilege to study the English language. It's a privilege to be proficient in mathematical skills because of all the doors that it opens. So it's about shaping the language correctly. So for those who are coming to us who are feeling a little bit like, why am I having to do these subjects? The government has recognised that it's necessary to keep going with them. And it's because it's going to help your life chances beyond this. One of the biggest factors why learners will leave education and not go into higher education or go into employment is because of low English and math skills. So let's say you come to us with a grade 1 or a grade 2 and you think, I'm never going to get to the 4. How about you just try and get the next rung up on the ladder? Not because of the number, but because you've developed important skills. So these are life skills. That's what I would say to me. These are life skills that you are going to need, and you're probably not going to realise until later in life when you're going to have to go and pay for an evening course. At Access, we offer good teaching and we offer one-to-one online tuition. It's a good place to study these subjects if you're a creative learner or a sports learner.
Well done, good pitch. A few things from me just to touch on from what you've said. I'm glad you said the last bit, because a lot of the learners who don't attend our lessons, and I think that's fair to say, don't do so because they think I'm never going to get a 4, and it's all about the number. I couldn't agree more that the underpinning skills that we're trying to develop are the more important aspect. Look, if you pass the exam, fantastic. Some learners, and again, a lot of learners will be watching this nodding their heads, don't like an exam situation, don't thrive in that situation. We understand that. We'll do our best to support that. But if you go into that exam, you give it your best, you've taken on as much as you can over the year, then we can recognize your progress in a number of different ways.
Absolutely.
And for me, from thinking about it as an employer, because that's the hat I have to put on a lot of days of the week and a month and year when we're looking through CVs and whatever. There's 3 factors for me that will contribute to someone being successful in obtaining a job, which is what our learners want. The first one is presenting yourself well digitally, so to speak, whether that's through your CV, whether it's through LinkedIn, whether it's through your profile. The second one is presenting yourself well verbally, and we spoke about command and language. And the third one is being able to influence. being able to influence the other person. All three of them things require not only English, but a degree of maths in terms of getting the balance right between the amount of time you're spending on answering a question and how much of your CV you're balancing on certain aspects. So that's the bit that I'm most passionate about from an English and maths point of view, is from those subjects what you need to take from them, and really try and hone in on those skills, but realize that it's hugely influential in terms of your ability to
So true. You are your biggest advert. You are your biggest advert. So I too, Gary, sift through CVs and these are CVs of staff of potential staff who want to become English teachers. And I think how have we ended up with a CV looking like this? You know, it's important because it's the way that we advertise and the way that we market our own selves is again through language, through design, and through these sorts of measures. But for any learners out there who feel that they've already reached your ceiling, because sometimes learners do feel that way, that it's like, I've reached my ceiling, it's as good as I'm going to get, I ain't getting any further than this. I would just challenge you to literally get rid of the idea of a ceiling and say to yourself, you know, I've got an opportunity here to be taught in a way that's perhaps going to suit me better. Our sports tutors do a great job in making the subject fit and contextualizing sport into it, using it. I've got one of my colleagues in sport at the moment who will use football autobiographies as the text that you read, giving you materials that interest you, using football stats in order to help you engage with number. So you're coming into an environment with members of staff who understand your interests, and we'll try and use those to tailor lessons to suit you. But get rid of the idea of I've reached it. Just give us an opportunity to work with you to try and burst through that. And don't worry about trying to be too cool either. We all failed it, or at least everyone else in your class did. It's fine. It's a safe place to make mistakes and to keep going. So try again, give it another go. You know.
Do you know, I think in a general life sense, the way I sort of would approach it, or would encourage people to approach it, is if you've initially failed a subject like English or maths, if you in a year or 2 years can get yourself from what people would perceive as a failure to then progressing through the levels to whatever number might be next to it, that's a genuine achievement to be proud of. Now, if you can do that, what else can you do? Right. Can you go into an entry-level job and get the next promotion? Do you know what I mean? It's not about the number or the subject even, really. It's about being able to put yourself in and dial in and go, I'm not accepting this level. I'm going to see what level I can get to. And I think it's a life skill.
Absolutely. The resilience that it takes to walk into a classroom and go, I'm going to give this another go. That's building other transferable skills, confidence, you know, being able to give it another try. How are you going to encourage anybody else to do that if you won't do it yourself? Do you know what I mean? So absolutely.
One thing to touch back on what you guys are saying and what I've just touched on before as well. I reckon it's the most common interview question in the world. Give us an example of when you've overcome something, you know, a difficult situation. I'll give an example as that. You know what? I hated this subject. I was terrible at it. I was getting kicked out of class. My attendance wasn't good. But I dug in and I went from here to here, like you're saying, and I've done it in a short period of time, and I developed X, Y, and Z. That there's no stronger message to an employer to say, you know what, that person's got something about them. You know,
there are loads of examples of celebrities, well-known people who struggled at school, struggled with those same topics, with some with learning difficulties and challenges who've overcome just by persistence. So I can't stress it enough. Really, these subjects, we need them whether we like it or not. So give it another try, and like Jordan was saying, even if you don't get that 4, just to be able to develop those skills and go the next rung up, it makes such a difference. And one of the things that I championed when I did take on the role is not just looking at high grade. It's called high grade achievement if someone gets a 4 or above. I'm also championing anyone who can go up a grade. Going up a grade is a big thing, especially in a year. So to be able to go up a grade, if you can do that with us, why not give it a try? I'd study English for fun, but I'm one of them weirdos. I literally would. One of those weirdos.
But again, that statement again is another breath of fresh air, as a just to reiterate what I said before. But look, we're literally at our time that we try and stick to 30 minutes. It's been thoroughly absorbing, and I'm not surprised. I said to Jordan before we come on, look, you might look at the title and go, Head of English and Maths, and think, God, this is going to be dry. But just to credit you, Claude, I've never met someone in your position in that particular role who's so passionate about it. And, you know, I don't mind sharing with the listeners or viewers that we've had plenty of arguments over the last couple of years. But all from a position of passion and all wanting to get the best out of our learners.
Absolutely.
I look forward to many more for that reason.
Absolutely. No, underneath it all, we've got massive respect for each other, and I do love that, Gary. It's only because we want the best for the learners from both our perspectives. So yeah, I love working with Gary.
What a perfect way to end that is.
He told me to say that, by the way, guys.
Yeah. No, it's been thoroughly enjoyable. This genuinely really enjoyed it.
Lovely. So have I. Thank you ever so much for having me on.
Thank you very much, Claude, and have a lovely Christmas.
Cheers, you too. And
Merry Christmas.
Take care.
Bye-bye.